So today we're going to talk about generosity of body, giving ourselves to service, giving our hands and our feet, giving our minds, giving our gifts and our talents, and giving it all in a generous way to the service of God and to other people. So you heard our readings this morning, right? It was like a two-punch because they both basically said, when you're going to be generous in your service, then you need to do it with humility. So we don't need to stand on the corner and look for accolades, and we don't need to wish that somebody would point out how wonderful we were. And so I don't think there's anybody in the room who would disagree with that, right? We all know that that's probably the best way. However, in our humanness, we get caught up, don't we? We sometimes fall into the trap of starting out giving our service with humility and without need for accolades or recognition, only to fall in the trap of then being upset that somebody didn't notice our sacrifice. It's a struggle that's real, right? The struggle is real because we're human. And sometimes we just need to have someone notice that we've done something of service, that we've done good for someone else. So I don't think there's really a need to beat ourselves up about that. I think since we're human, it happens. At the same time, I think the Scripture calls us to keep thinking about what it means to be humble in our service, to approach the idea of giving myself away in a way that is not expecting to get recognition for it. So I think we really can't miss the point here that if we're going to consider being generous, we also have to figure out a way to consider how we will remain humble, right? We at least have to consider it, true? So I've been looking at this for weeks, and I've been digging around and trying to find some things and some ways that we could tap that would help us with this whole idea of giving and being generous with a spirit of humility. And I'm going to tell you, everything I've found seems to boil down to one point. I think you're going to be surprised about it. That humility is only something we can do consistently when we understand giving and receiving. That at the end of the day, if we are not able to see the continuous circle of giving and receiving, then we will also miss the continuous circle of giving generously and with humility. So I want us to take a look at what generosity is when we're humble, and how does that look, and how are we going to somehow get ourselves to that place? So there are a couple of things I want you to understand about giving and receiving in the circle. First of all, giving and receiving always reside together. They are inextricably connected. You simply cannot do one without the other without breaking something integral to the idea of giving and receiving. You see the infinity sign here. I think giving and receiving is like that, where there is an endless circle of integration between giving and receiving, where both depend on one another to make the circle and to cause something to be infinite in our experience of it. Unfortunately, we separate these things too often, don't we? We separate giving and receiving. Y'all need to nod your heads because we all do, right? I mean, we all separate them far too often. And when we separate them, we break this infinity. When we separate them, we do basically one of two things. We give expecting something in return, or we give thinking it is inappropriate or bad to receive anything in return. That's what happens when we cause them to be separate from one another. So I hope that we would wish to be more like the infinity sign. That we would wish to pull giving and receiving together inside our own bodies as we try to offer ourselves generously. And so, receiving and giving becomes something that seems a little more natural to us. I'm not sure that in our conditioning and in our upbringing, we were taught much about these things going together. I mean, we heard it, right? We've heard it. But whether or not that's really what the world has taught us is an altogether different thing. Because we either, again, we give and we expect to get something in return, or we just give and give and give and give and never are willing to receive anything, only to end up bitter. And only to send people we gave to a bill in the mail. Because we just went over the line. This is what separating them will do to us. So I want you to think about this. Receiving gives the act of giving a place to go. Receiving gives the act of giving a place to go. If the act of giving has no place to go, which is receiving, then the act of giving lands nowhere. You see how they are so connected. I was reading a book last year called When Helping Hurts. And it, as I was recalling it in preparation for this message, you know, I was remembering how it really laid out very clearly this whole idea of separating giving and receiving, when helping hurts. Because the primary message of the book was that when we offer ourselves to help other people, often the mistake we make is believing that we are helping them only and that they have nothing to give us in return. That we can't learn anything from the person who can't even afford to get a meal today. That we can't learn something or receive something from someone who is homeless and on the street. You see? And this book sort of points out that the way helping like that is hurtful is that it takes the dignity away from the other people that you are trying to help. And so there's this sense in which we need to give without expecting anything in return, but be open to receiving the gifts that are coming our way from the very people that we thought we were there to help. Does that make sense? So this is the trick. It's the trickster of sorts, where we get it all mixed up. So we don't want our helping to hurt, do we? We want our helping to help, which means we've got to somehow figure this out. So how do we keep the circle going? How do we keep that infinity when it comes to giving and receiving? Well, so first of all, I would say this. When you give, think about it this way. Give what you need. Give away what you need. If you need love, give it away. If you need attention, give it away. If you need money, teach someone else how to get money. You see? Yeah. Give away what you need. I want to say that I have learned this lesson from my sweetheart, Kate. Because she grew up in a place where she did not get very much love, there was not very much care, and there was certainly not very much money. And she had an awful lot to overcome in her life because of that. And so she taught me one day this whole thing about, well, give what you need. That's what I learned I had to do, was that in growing up lacking a lot, I had to learn to give away what I needed in order to get that. And that to do anything else only brought me more lack of everything I needed. So give away what you need. The best example I have of her in that particular principle is that when we still lived in St. Louis, we'd been to dinner, and she took a to-go box, and when we left the restaurant and we were walking a couple of blocks to our car, we saw a homeless woman sitting on the curb at the corner. And we were talking, and all of a sudden, Kate just sort of left our conversation, and she walked over and sat down on the curb with this homeless woman. And she began to so easily interact with her. And then she took her leftovers from the restaurant and gave them to the homeless woman. And, you know, the woman was very grateful and thanked her. And Kay said, oh, no, let's eat right now. And so she opened up the box for the lady, and there was a plastic fork in there, and so she opened it up for her and gave it to her. And she sat with her while she ate. And she listened to her story. Do you see the difference? She didn't just sort of throw the box of food at the homeless woman and say, here. That's when helping can hurt. She sat down on the curb with her while she ate. Now, you know what else? I ended up sitting on the curb too. Seemed silly for me to go to the car, so I sat too. But I got to witness what happened between them, because Kate was open not only to giving her something, but to receiving her company, receiving her story, receiving her gratitude. So give away what you need. Second thing is, receive deeply. Receive deeply. Many of you, as you've come to me for communion, I will say this frequently when I serve you, is to receive this meal of love and grace deeply. Receive it. Take it in. Nourish it. Honor it. Love it. Help it to grow inside you. Receive it deeply. So that is not a throwaway comment, by the way. Because do you understand that to receive this meal deeply means that you honor that God has given it. Receiving deeply means that you honor the one who has given it to you. So when you encounter someone who wants to give you something, even when you think you're the one that's helping, receive it deeply. It will change who you are and how you are in the world. When you receive whatever anyone can give you and wants to give you, receive it deeply. I think the reason we struggle with receiving is because we haven't yet accepted this gift. We haven't yet really believed sometimes that God has loved us that much, that God has loved us so much, that there is infinite flow of love and grace to us all the time. All the time. There is not a moment when God is not sending love and grace to you and to me. There is not one moment. And if anybody tells you that, their helping is hurting. In every moment that is available. And God is sending it our way. What happens when the people of God receive that deeply? You know what happens? You can't stop us from doing good. There is not anything in all of the world that can stop us from doing good when we receive deeply the love and grace that is always there for us. The third thing, in order for us to stay humble, is to live in gratitude. Now, again, we know these things. In some ways, I'm preaching to the choir, because we all know this. We all know these things. It's just about living in them that's a little harder. And so I want you to think about gratitude this way. We're moving into Thanksgiving. That gratitude is noticing the opportunities to give. Let that sink in a minute. When we live in gratitude, we actually notice where there are moments that we can give something. Because realize that it's not the big stuff in the end. It's the compliment you give somebody that you don't know. Right? It's the smile to someone that you meet. Yesterday, I was at Staples getting my TSA approval for pre-check at the airport. And there were several of us waiting there. And a woman came up. She had her Staples buggy with her, and it was empty. And she was going to sit down, and she rolled her buggy right up in front of the door where we all had to go in to do our little appointment for the TSA pre-check. Right in front of the door. Well, I was instantly annoyed. Like, really? Did you not notice the door? Seriously? Right. And then I was like, oh my goodness, you're going to preach tomorrow about this. Tomorrow? So you need to reel it in, Missy. Reel it in. And so I sort of tried to get myself all centered again. And so she came, of course, and sat right down next to me. Of course. So when I kind of got myself composed a little bit better and got myself in a better place, I turned to her and I said, would it be okay with you if I moved your buggy around the corner there with mine? Because I think people are going to be coming in and out of that door. And she said, oh, honey, I didn't even see that door. Okay. Okay. So anyway, I moved her buggy and I sat back down. And there was something about the innocence of her not seeing the door that was something for me to receive. It was something for me to notice that, you know, sometimes people just don't see it. That she wasn't trying to be annoying. She wasn't trying to upset the rest of us. She just didn't see the door. And so we struck up a conversation. And I also learned a whole lot more about her and the reasons that she might not have seen the door. She had a lot going on in her life, as it turns out. And with all that she had running around in her heart and mind, it's little wonder she didn't see the door. Do you see how I had a chance to be her eyes? And in doing so, after I got myself sorted out, in doing so, received a very sweet reminder that is a gift. That you just don't know why people don't see the door. You just never know why people don't see the door. So gratitude will give us opportunities for giving. And gratitude will also give us opportunities for receiving. I want you to notice this week, especially the opportunities to receive something in the places you might least expect it. With the people who annoy you most. With the people who do things that seem so obvious to you that they should not. To look at the opportunity to receive something from someone who seems to have nothing. See what might be there. Gratitude will do that to you if you just take notice. I don't believe we want our helping to hurt. I also believe that we want to be in the circle of giving and receiving, right? We want to, right? And so we just have to work at it some more. And I want to tell you the profound thing that happens by telling you my own story. My second trip to South Africa, which was before apartheid was over. I was touring part of South Africa, and in the cities, there were all the townships that you could see. Remember the townships? The little villages where people lived, native people lived in absolutely abject poverty. There's not one piece of poverty in this country that could even compare to the poverty that you would see there. And so I asked the person that was driving me around if we could go to a township, if that was even okay. I wasn't really clear and sure on that. And she said, sure. So we stopped at one of the townships. And my host seemed to have a knowledge of the appropriate thing to ask and to say in order for us to sort of enter their little village. So a woman came up to us. I don't know, she was probably a middle-aged black woman. And she didn't have but about 3 or 4 teeth, but she had the biggest smile I've ever seen. She didn't seem to have any compunction about the fact that she had no teeth. It was actually very lovely. A big old smile. And she took me by the hand and started to take me over to the place where she and her family lived. Now this was a box No, really. It was a cardboard box, or a group of boxes that had been put together to make their house. So obviously you couldn't stand up to go in. But she pulled me on in. We sat down on the dirt. And in the center, there was a little fire going, because it was a little chilly. And of course, I began to immediately worry about having a fire in a cardboard box. Not understanding that they'd been doing this a while. So they'd figured out how to make that work, right? And I started to feel sick. I thought, I'm going to throw up, because I couldn't believe that people would live like that. Pretty soon, her grandchildren started to pour into the box. These little kids who had absolutely nothing. Most of them looked like they were malnourished. Most of them didn't have very many clothes on at all. And they came in and crowded in the tent, and they were enamored by an American. They were just staring at me. An American who was fully clothed and had had a good meal already. And they started to sing to me. Now, they were singing in Zulu, so I didn't really know what the words were, but they were singing to me. And so I asked the person, my host, I said, do you know what they're singing? And she said, yeah, it's a Zulu song that says, you're walking in the light of God. We sang it this morning. We should have sang the African version. She said, they're singing, you're walking in the light of God. So I just was a puddle. I just completely broke down and cried, right? And I still wanted to throw up. On reflection, I think the reason I wanted to throw up was because I went there a little bit cocky about how I might go and see those conditions and help them. I turned out to be the one who was blessed. Because even in the depths of poverty, they had a joy I didn't know anything about. Their joy was in the center of that infinity symbol where giving and receiving meet. They hadn't forgotten the lessons of giving. But I had forgotten the lesson of receiving. I wanted to throw up because it was so hard for me to listen to them give me a blessing when I had so much and they had nothing. But what a great moment in my life that a bunch of little black, poor, steeped in poverty, imprisoned in so many ways during apartheid, were singing, "You are walking in the light of God." I had a lot more to give after that day, just because I was forced, I had to find a place to receive their gift. Those kids knew about giving their body generously, giving their love and their service, and giving their voices to bless me. That is my hope for all of us, and may it be so. Amen.